of conversations where we talk about things that more people, well, in my opinion, more people should be talking about. And it's my show, so that, in my opinion, is all that matters when it comes to creating titles of shows. um, Today, I'm excited to have this conversation because, one, we're talking about authenticity. For those of you who know me, I'm all about authenticity. But I think that there's many concepts of authenticity, some which are helpful and some which are not helpful. So we're going to talk about some of those things today. And we're also going to talk about this concept of content creation. So there's probably a lot of you, if you're coming from a entrepreneurial background, you probably haven't been able to avoid the conversation about content creation. I come from a marketing background, so corporately, there's also content creation. We show up on social medias, and there's people who are creating content, and we are consuming it. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so content creation is really just a thing, and it's not going anywhere. And so I'm really excited to have Kirsten here with me today because, okay, just for one, my mouth seems to not be working quite properly. So I've been stumbling over my words for the last little bit. So maybe that's the universe telling me I should slow down in my talking speed, because now I feel like
it's just a natural thing. It's a natural. I recently learned that there is a gap between the thinking speed and the talking speed. So we think faster than we talk, and I think your brain is about 10 steps ahead, maybe.
This would be classic Tracy with my brain 10 steps ahead of my mouth. So I'm just going to slow it down a little bit because it's Tuesday. It's not Friday. We're here on a different day of the week with all of our peeps today. And so for those of you who are joining us live, we really want to encourage you to get into the conversation as well. So anything that you've heard about authentic content creation that maybe confuses you, that you have questions about, experiences you've had, insights that you get throughout the conversation, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We really want to have a wider conversation because there are really a lot of, shall we call them, marketing myths that exist in this arena. And of course, we always don't have enough time to talk about all of the things, but we're going to talk about some of them today and give you some places to go to continue to stay in the conversation. So I'm going to give my voice and my brain an opportunity to catch up to each other and let Kirsten introduce herself and tell us a little bit more about you, Kirsten, and why you love the conversation about content creation, but specifically authenticity.
All right. Right. So I am a copywriter and brand messaging strategist, which in simple word means like I basically help other people getting their messages out into the world and cutting through the noise of content which is out there in the world. And there's a lot, and it's very loud, and a lot of it is very confusing, and a lot of it is very generic and very blueprinted, which is one of those myths we can talk about later. But yeah, so I've been doing that for a while. I've spent quite a while in corporate as well. So I've also got a similar background. I wasn't so much in marketing as I was more in operations management, but I've always been a writer. I've always written, so I love that. So anyway, I wanted to kick this off with a definition of authenticity, because I think if we're discussing a topic, we should really know what we're talking about. And so I Googled this actually, and it says authenticity is the quality of being real or true, and being true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. So for me, then, the biggest thing is to actually know who you are. Because that is, me included, when I started out as a copywriter, I was looking to so many other copywriters. Oh, what are they doing? What are they doing? And then I wrote my first website, and it was kind of Frankenstein's monster website, because I took a little bit from that copywriter, I took a little bit from that copywriter, and it was copying in the worst sense when I started out. But I've evolved since then, and really figured out what I'm about. And I think that was a really, really big turning point in my career as a copywriter, to figure out who I am, and then find the courage to be myself authentically. So, and then we can take it from there. Tracy.
Yeah. Well, and one of the additional, I really love that definition of authenticity. And if I remember correctly, there's like 5 definitions of authenticity in like Merriam-Webster's dictionary, but that's my favorite one as well. And one of the other framings I love to do when it comes to authenticity is I'm a like feeling type person, right? I like to get my clients to take off their thinking cap and put on their feeling cap. I did an exercise with a client on that earlier today. And authenticity is the thing that feels right for you, right? So when we're talking about being real and genuine and true, those things are different for all people. What it looks like for me to be real is different than what it looks like for Kirsten to be real. And so it's not about looking a specific way and then being able to like check the checkbox of yes, I'm being authentic. It's not about the amount that you share, right? It's not about how personal you get. It's about, I want to say this right now, and so I go and say it. Right?
Say it.
And when we think about it that way, one of the phrases that always comes to me is that you like own your voice, right?
Yeah.
You have a voice, and it's not about picking and choosing people. Like, I love that you said Frankenstein's monster, because I think this happens a lot, right? People pick and choose companies, like even from a company content creation perspective, right? I've worked for companies where like, well, we really love this, that this competitor is doing, and we got to do that. And so we got to do this because that competitor is doing that. And then we read this leadership book and this is a really good idea. So we're going to pull it from there. And pretty soon you just have Frankenstein's monster of content. You don't have something that authentically represents you. And whether you as a corporate brand or you as an individual entrepreneur, or even maybe you work for someone else, but you're trying to build your personal brand online, right? Like the content creation is about coming from a space of, this is what I want to say. And this is something that I would be proud that people know about me. And there definitely is that like deep down, I have to learn those things about myself before I can actually know the answer to whether or not something is authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that feeling thing is actually quite good. That's your subconscious saying, hey, girl, you didn't really want to say that. So we often have, when we have conversations, and the conversation's over, the person, whatever, someone we met on a walk or so walked on, and he said, oh, I should have said this and I should have said that. And that really is your subconscious telling you, hey, you were not quite aligned. And that's when you publish or post your content, and you get this feeling, this very slight feeling that you're not congruent with what you're putting out there, then you're not authentic, because your subconscious knows when you are authentic, and you really need to align with that. And to get into your subconscious, you do need to dig a little bit deeper, and you need to do all that boring work, which is about your values and your beliefs and what you stand up for, what your story really is. And then some people, they always say, oh yeah, like you said, oh, you have a voice. But what is the voice? How do I find my voice? It's not just, I can't just rummage through my cupboard and find my voice in there. It's,
often I feel like we're like, I'm just going to rummage through all of these copywriters and find my voice in there.
No, you don't.
No,
you don't. And that's when you do that, all this deep stuff, when you go through understanding yourself, that is actually the most valuable thing that you can do. And that is even a bit painful when you look in yourself in the face and say, this is really not so great, but it's me. And so you just accept it, or you change it. You've got that option too. But it all kind of lies within your beliefs, your innate strengths that you have, but also how you evolve. Because my voice, like it is now, was not the same 5 years ago. It's totally different, because everything every day, and also all the content that you consume, that shapes you, that shapes your voice, and you evolve every day. And for example, someone who reads The Economist every day will possibly have a different voice to someone who just scrolls through Facebook all day. So there's not just the level of sophistication, but also the depth of topics, I would say, and what concerns you, what kind of events and movements and philosophies are interesting for you. And I think that's important. And then you also need to, that's a myth which I want to kind of talk about now. People who say, follow this blueprint, this you need to do this to be successful on LinkedIn, for example.
Quote unquote successful.
Successful. Yeah. So first, define your version of success. That means something else for different people.
That's a completely different topic.
Yeah. Oh, that's another interesting one, actually. And then you look at, okay, so which blueprint or which process am I going to use? And then you maybe buy something. A lot of people spend a lot of money to get some blueprints, and then they start implementing, and they implement, and it's not working for them. And then they realize, heck, this dude here who sold me this for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, it's working for him because he's got his business, he's got his own voice, he's got his own community. There were 5 years ago when he developed it, there were totally different economic circumstances at the time, and he's American, whereas I'm German, and so it's working for him, but it's not working for me. So I think this blueprint stuff is, if you take it with a grain of salt and extract some things that make sense, and the rest is all your own, I think then you can. Still shouldn't pay $5,000 for it, but
see, and this is what makes me angry is like, if anybody is curious about what path I took or how I create my content or any of those things, I will tell you it, because it's my way, and I don't know that it's going to work for you. If I tell you my way and it sounds good to you and you want to try it, great. But if you try it and it doesn't work, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means there's a different
with the way I do it.
Right. That's just my way. And I say that for people. This is not the right way. It's my way. If my way works for me, I don't believe in one right way. And I think that this is important because people do charge a lot of money to learn a blueprint. And for most of us, there will be a very small percentage of people who will pay for a blueprint, and they'll be perfectly aligned values and experience wise, and it will work. And then every company has like 5 to 10 testimonials of how this has worked so amazingly, right? But for most people, someone else's blueprint, I wish I had the quote with me right now. It's in my phone. I might pull it up later. But I was reading in the Reader's Digest in this quote about, like, if the path in front of you is totally cleared already, you're traveling on someone else's path.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That path, right? Like, this is just a fact, right? And that it's the path of least resistance, sure. But is it the path that is going to be most meaningful for you to have traveled? And at the end of the day, I mean, get a little bit existentialist here, but we have one life. I have one journey for me, right? I could follow in someone else's footsteps the entire time I do that. But is that the path for me? Was that the path I was meant to travel? Or was it just the path of least resistance? And I think this is important this is an important part of the conversation. We're talking about authentic content creation, because I don't believe in just showing up to create content just to create content. And I will tell, Most businesses have experienced this, actually even more than entrepreneurs, where they like put up their like posts on their company page and like 3 employees like it and no one else sees it. Right. And you're like, oh, good thing I spent the time posting that post today. Right. Like, no, that's not contributing anything. And I wouldn't even put it into the bucket of authentic, because it's just brochureware, right? Like, we're just promoting ourselves. And so one of the things that you made me think, Kirsten, when you were sharing, was that, like, why am I doing this? What is the why behind me posting something, right? And I think that there's a really great alignment with authenticity and knowing what that why is.
Mm-hmm.
Am I posting this because I have to post something today? I'll be honest. When I was in corporate, I've never done that on a personal entrepreneurship level, but I used to do that all the time in corporate, right? Like, we had to have a post every day. So I posted stuff, posted repeat stuff. I posted not interesting stuff. The goal wasn't to like create engaging content. The goal was to create content, right? And so we just create content. And a lot of the times, this is one of those, I don't know that I would say it's a myth per se, but it's definitely a narrative in that everything is just about creating content. And if I just create content and put it out there, then I'll get all the business. And I would guess there's 100 people right now. I don't know how many people are watching this live, but 50% of you could say, like, I've put out content and it has done nothing for me.
Yeah. It's, that there's so much behind this content creation, like the quantity over the quality, where I truly believe, don't post so often, but post better stuff, because authenticity is not situational. It's not like you like if you're a parent and you go to your son's room and say, oh, you really have to tidy up, this is such a mess again. Okay, that's done. And will your son really tidy up when you shout at him once? Probably not.
Well, my son won't.
Yeah, but if you consistently teach him to say, hey, in a nice way, hey, let's put this away. You've eaten up. You can't just leave your plate on the counter. Let's make it a routine and put it away. And you do that consistently every day, then guess what? it's you create a habit.
Sure.
And it's the same with showing up authentically, and that's also how you get known for stuff. So do the stuff that you do it well, and then and also speak your mind, even if you think, should I tone it down? Because we censor ourselves too much. We put a filter on and we say, okay, what if we don't even use the right pronouns anymore?
Everything's become more complex.
Yeah, and you say no. Just of course you should. I don't believe in insulting people, but you can be controversial and you can poke the bear a little bit, where you say something about, oh, they've been posting this, but I think it's not that, it's something else, and here are the reasons for it. So
I think that there is room for that. Again, if you know your why, right? Like, are you showing up to just create conflict between you and this other person? Or are you like, one of the best examples I remember for myself is there's another personal branding coach that I follow, and she had posted something about how nobody likes vanilla, right? So don't show up.
I do.
That was my point, right? And she's convincing everybody they should be chocolate, right? And there's a whole bunch of people who are agreeing with her, and it's fine. I don't agree with that, right? I think if you identify as vanilla, especially like a rich Madagascar vanilla bean delicious ice cream, then you shouldn't pretend to be chocolate because other people like chocolate, right? You should be vanilla, and you should own that you're vanilla. So I posted about that, and there were people who follow her who don't like that, right? And that's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't post it just to be controversial. I posted it because that's what I believe. I posted it because I know that there are people who identify as vanilla who will read this and think they need to pretend to be chocolate in order to be liked or accepted or to sell things or to whatever your reason for having a personal brand online. But that I don't believe that's true. And my goal with my content is to give people a different way of looking at things. And it's an invitation to look at things differently. You don't have to. I can't force anybody to do anything, right? I have a 4-year-old son. I have to set an alarm for him to brush his teeth, right? Which works actually amazing. In how many minutes would you like to brush your teeth? 8. Great. I'll set this alarm for 8 minutes and we'll brush your teeth in 8 minutes. But again, another example of that's a way. Is it the right way? No. Some people would be like, you shouldn't give your kid the opportunity to dictate on. And like, you know what? Mostly I care that my kid brushes his teeth and that he doesn't feel angry about brushing his teeth, because then he won't want to brush his teeth. So, but this is on a tangent.
Yeah. I mean, there's enough space for people to have different belief systems as well. And so what I think authenticity does a lot is also it helps with mind shifts. So, and it helps to pre-select your community to those people who fit into, who are aligned with you, which kind of shows again through values and whatnot, and your why and why you're doing this. And then when you have that in place and you know where you're going, you have your strategy, then you can get people on your bandwagon by showing them or convincing them, this is how I think. And if you think about it deeply, maybe you want to come over and join us, because there are so many different schools of thoughts. And I think, yeah, that's great. And you can be inspired by all of them. But when you consistently post in your own voice, then you do kind of surround yourself with people who have a similar space of belief or whatever you call it, and who have similar goals. They have similar whys. And so just if you kind of on the one side, you have these people who say, I teach you how you can make six figures in 1 month.
It might as well be figures in most scenarios.
Because most of them don't anyway.
Usually not 6 figures.
And then there are people who believe in serving their clients and giving them value and helping them evolve and develop, to listen to their clients. And I think that's what it should be also with content creation, because you can have monologues like I'm now, and you can have conversations like we're supposed to have right here.
We're doing that. We just both have large talking breaks. Because we need that moment for our brains to.
So the point is that you have conversations and you really listen to your audience. And in order to be authentic, you really need to listen actively and deeply and see that what they are offering you is a gift that you can pick up and respond to. You can say, no, I don't agree with it. Or you can say, wow, that's a new perspective. I'd like to dive into that. And then you can always make a decision whether it's for you or not for you. But you have to allow your audience to speak their minds, and you have to speak your own mind. And when you do that consistently and you listen to each other, I think that's a brilliant process of evolution and having actually conversations rather than monologues.
Yeah, I think, okay, there's 2 important things that I want to touch on. So the first one is this concept of a conversation, as opposed to maybe the historical perception of content creation, right? I feel like a lot of times content creation is like an assembly line machine, and it's just like pumping out things, right? But on an assembly line, creating, I don't know why I'm thinking of one making crayons, but just go with it. We're here making crayons, right? This isn't a conversation, right? Like I'm just producing a thing. I'm not listening. I I could do that completely on my own, and most of
And
it's
you
done
have a
by
specification.
right. And it hits its same specification every single time. And I think, again, in content creation, there's a lot of narrative around consistency and frequency. And I do not believe consistency and frequency are the same thing. So let's just break that up. It's two things right now. But the concepts get misconstrued. And then people are like, okay, content creation is about producing content, and it is about producing content every day, right? But if we talk about a consistent brand experience, if we talk about what it actually takes to build trust with people, to build a relationship with people, these are things that involve two humans. They involve a two-way dialogue. You touched on listening, right? So listening is part of a two-way dialogue, right? And if we're not, maybe I'll ask the hard question, Kirsten. If we're not incorporating this concept of conversation into our content creation, is how close can we get to authentic? Like, what's authentic for me if I'm not doing the listening part?
I think, yes, you can be authentic, because there are people who speak their minds all the time, and very often these are very lonely people.
This is a good point, right?
Yeah, you can be
really isn't tied into that conversation piece. But if I'm a big believer, this is why I do these conversations, because I feel like I can learn more about what I think about things in conversation with people. And when I was thinking that, I was like, well, I don't know that I had this conversation with my husband a while ago in the car, and we were talking about the Flat Earth Society, which comes up often in my class.
Yeah.
But I was saying that, I mean, they believe the Earth is flat. It doesn't really change how I live my day-to-day life, right? But one of the things that I realized about sharing your perspective, so if I'm going to come on, I'm going to share what is authentic for me today perspective, but I'm not going to listen to anybody else sharing their authentic perspective, then yes, I'm being authentic, but I'm really not
growing.
I'm more on that just like production line machinery track, right? Like, okay, I can create a lot of this, but I'm not growing and changing and evolving.
No, you're not. And it's not like having a conversation. It's like telling people what to think. I think the most important thing is that you are challenging people to think. You're giving them little nuggets to develop their thoughts, and then they develop as well, and you develop, because then they get back to you and you listen to them, and it's an ever kind of evolving thing. But people like content that they like novelty, and they don't like to talk about the same thing all over again. And for example, there's one of these myths like, oh, you have to capture your audience in the first 3 seconds or something like that, and then afterwards they can't focus anymore. And I think it's total rubbish. That's another myth that I don't like, because I don't think that people have defective brains. People have perfectly good brains to focus on something for hours. They watch Netflix for hours. They read books for hours. So why shouldn't they be able to read a 5-minute social media post? They can. It's just that this content is so bloody boring, because it's so generic and so repetitive, that people just die of boredom, and they want content that is that pokes them a little bit and say, have you thought about this? Here's another angle to look at this. I've got a new perspective, and there's some research that has come out. What do you say about that? And then one last thing that came up when you spoke about the assembly line is, oh gosh, I've lost it again. I had this thought.
We have a lot of thoughts, everybody.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. They kind of tumble over themselves in my head at the moment. Oh yeah, algorithms. That's another myth. The algorithm.
Well,
So
algorithms exist, so we're not telling you that the fact that algorithms exist is a myth, but there's a lot of narrative about like just try to optimize the algorithm.
exactly, because you can do that. You can have your frequency. You can stuff so many keywords into your posts all the time that one post resembles the next. And in fact, you're writing for people who then give you the like, give you the comment, which then kicks off the algorithm. So it is not just the algorithm, and that's why you should never just focus on the algorithm. All these people say, "Oh, I need an SEO dense homepage or something like that." If this kind of hope marketing is your strategy, so that people stumble upon your website because you have your homepage stuffed full of kind of keywords, or whether you build a community of people who follow you because they value your content and your authenticity, and you kind of draw people in and onto your website, or not even your website, but they just DM you and you have a conversation with them like with a normal person. I think that works a lot better. I think relationship building, authentic relationship building, takes a much higher value than the algorithm.
And I mean, there's been a lot of these things historically, like on Instagram for a long time. It was all about like how your like block looked, right, and how balanced it was, and the colors and all these things. And humans don't build connections that way, right? They build connections when there's something that you say that resonates with them. And I want to go quickly back to what we were talking about in terms of convincing people, right? Because I think a lot of times people think content, this is what I'm here to do, to convince people to think, be, and do the things that I do, right? And let's be honest, you can't convince anybody else to do anything they don't want to do. So what content can do, we talked about it a whole bunch already, give people a new way to look at things and invite them to look at that. Again, if I invite you to a party, I can't make you come, right? Like I'm not going to come to your house and drag you to my house and come to a party, right? I invite you to the party and you attend the party if you want to come to the party. And two, and I think the thing that really gets missed in a lot of the content creation conversations is that when I show up and I say something I believe, and I can really stand there in my ownership of that and say, I believe this, and I know there's going to be people who don't believe this, and that's okay because I believe it. It gives the people who believe that as well an opportunity to connect with you. And it's really interesting because for like Kirsten and I, we've had a few conversations about like marketing myths and how we need to bust them. And it doesn't help that people continue to think that these things are true, right? Which is why we're here having this conversation today. But it's not everybody in the world cares about breaking marketing myths. Not everybody in the world knows enough about marketing to understand what's a myth and what is true, right? And when I show up and talk about that, when Kirsten shows up and talks about it, like, oh yeah, we're in the same zone here, right? Like we're saying the same things in our own words. And on that note, let's talk about that for a little bit, because we talked about Frankenstein's monster with words. And I think there's still a concept where a lot of people think that there's the right words. Like there's one set of right words that you could say to all people that would make them understand what it is that you do. And so, Kirsten, what are your thoughts on
that? But first of all, we've got so many words and we're creating new words all the time. So
I constantly make up words.
Yeah, why would we do that? So no, it's that's not correct in my eyes. I think that there's a beauty in language, and even one word in a different context means something totally different. So, and also you don't have to use the same words as other people. So from a copywriting perspective, there are certain psychological concepts and mechanisms that work on people. So that's why you have these copywriting formulas like AIDA or Pastor or something, whatever you call them. There's quite a few different ones, and they work because they follow a psychological process that buyers go through. But with content, the beauty is that you need a good structure. I have to say that a structure helps. Otherwise, everything gets really, really confusing, and you're all over the place. But you can choose your words, you can choose your topics, you can choose which perspective, which angles you're giving them. You can choose words in a certain way. So one word might have a negative connotation in one context and a positive in another. So, and I think it's also not true to use the same words, because then you're taking someone else's words and stuff them into your content, and it sounds weird, and people notice that. So if you a reader who pays attention and who has followed a certain person for a while, you get used to the style, and you want to see that style, you want to see that certain, maybe a sense of humor or whatever it is. And then you notice when they bought a certain package or
They bought the
365
templates.
yeah, templates for your posts for the whole year, $27.
Yeah.
And so you buy that, and then you say, oh, they bought that template too.
And then I will tell you, people like us who read a lot of content are like, oh, that person bought that package and that person bought that package. And pretty much everybody in the web design industry, for whatever reason, is using the same messages. And you're like, I've mentioned it to a couple of people. They're like, do you know that every single person who's connected with me in your industry uses this exact same template? You're just creating a bunch of like cost competition because you all look the same. And then this is the thing, right? Like, so I'm a big fan of the story brand model. I think that the story brand model has a lot.
Donald Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. And it was really interesting because I had a client once, and she chose me because I was a fan of story brand. And I said, like, yeah, we'll do all this work and then we'll put it together in a story brand script for you at the end. And I got to the end, and I was plugging in all of because it's like a formula, right? Plugging in all these things. And I'm like, this does not fit this person at all, right? And so I was like, this was a deliverable. So I sent it, but I also sent my own version, and all of the inputs were the same, but they were in a different combination, right? And I was like, I think this says you more than this. Of course, like, it's your brand, you do what you want with it. But it was really interesting because then she was like, I read both of these to her husband, and he was like, well, that doesn't sound like you at all, but that one totally does, right? And you're like, it's not that the script is bad. There's good things to learn from it. There's good knowledge. And these are the types of things you can learn from a template. It's just that so many people use the template just as it is, fill in the blanks, and then just send it out to everybody. And you're like, and you sound the same as every other person who uses that template. And as far as I'm concerned, the number one rule of marketing is to be different than the other people so that you stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You already are different by being you, and that's your absolutely inimitable resource for your differentiation. If you have a personal brand, then it's you who is the brand, and it really makes sense to figure out who you are and who you are as a brand. So people who don't do that, who don't spend time on that, and I see that every day, that people don't. They just think they buy these prompts or so, and they'd be all right. But the deep work is really, really necessary, because then you can spontaneously talk about your business, for example. And in the beginning, I still remember when someone, what are you doing? I'm a copywriter, and there's not much to say about that. But now, since I figured out who I am, I can talk about more what I do and how I do it, why I do it, what the outcomes are, what my strategy is. I can do that, and also listening to them, and then I can modify my response to them based on what their needs are. And I think that's where the true mastery comes in, that you have solid foundations, and then you can respond to your counterpart in a much better way, and explain it in terms that they better understand, or pick out certain topics or challenges that they have that you can address, instead of giving them a spiel of what's all the bonuses that are included in your program. And
check.
Yeah,
You get free Facebook group, everybody. Woo!
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Okay.
just a little marketing. I'm creating this content and copywriting membership at the moment, which I want to launch.
Which
in
you're
December.
going to launch.
I'm going to. And one thing about the membership, where I thought, because there's so many people that will say, oh, I don't know what to write about. One thing is that I do not want to give them a prompt for every day, but that I want to put an idea out and certain questions to ask, so that they could pick that up and create their own post based on a few stimulating questions, rather than say, here's your fill the gap text. And I think that also helps with authenticity, because yes, your mind got kind of kicked off by a question, but then you can develop it just as you like. And I think that makes a difference. So that's one thing that I have to think about that a little bit more. But I wanted to see if I put that in there, because I'm so when I consume content on LinkedIn, for example, there are certain people who I really like to follow, because they are quirky, they have strong opinions, they come up with something new. And with new, I don't mean they come up with totally new topics, but they come up with a new angle to something. And I like that. And they go deep. I really like it when people go deep, because that is something that they're passionate about. And it also shows that they have a large knowledge base about that topic, so that they can go deep, that they can put a spotlight on different subtopics and stuff like that. And that's also authentic. You can be so passionate when you talk about a topic that you're passionate about, and that is contagious, because when you're authentic, you put your mood into it. You put your, I mean, sometimes you get up and you feel like, ugh, and then you can write a blog post that day, and people will pick up on it, and they say, oh, come on, Kirsten, cheer up, it's not all that bad.
Now we're just spreading blah.
Yeah.
But I think this is a really important point. It's really interesting, because I was talking to someone earlier about Toastmasters, because I used to do Toastmasters, which is a public speaking club. And one of the biggest struggles speakers had was trying to write a speech about something they don't know, which is not something they tell you should do in Toastmasters. It's just that people think that they should talk about this. I should talk about this. I am a copywriter, so I should be talking about templates, right? Like, I don't know, we get all these like shoulds in our head, and we forget that we are much more effective at communicating with emotion when we're talking about something that we care about. And so I would encourage you all to listen. I see Russ in here, and he's he's saying hello to everybody, but I know that Russ always does such a great job of just like talking about what he cares about, right? The things that he's passionate about. He doesn't talk about all things. He talks about the things that pique his interest. And this is where we really have a great opening to create authentic content. And I would add on, Kirsten, this concept of the questions. I love that. I think that's great. And I would encourage us all to like look around. What are the things that we question, right? When I see an experience between two people, do I think that that is beneficial? Do I think that it's not? These are things that each one of us uniquely experiences, and we each have a category of things that we're curious about. So I overly curious about the human condition, right? And the nuances of interpersonal relationships and management and leadership and like all the things, right? It's super complex. And every time I learn more about it, I'm super intrigued. I have more and more questions. Whereas my son loves ceiling fans. I have no questions that I care to be answered about ceiling fans, right? And it's hard. This is like, then we're talking about interpersonal relationships and how you build those relationships when your interests are completely different. That's not what we're talking about today. But if I was going to go and stand on a stage and talk to a whole bunch of people who are in love with ceiling fans, yeah, I'd be panicked. I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything to say in that conversation. And so kind of tying this back to knowing yourself, right? Like, when I know myself and I know the conversations that I want to participate in, well, then I can go and create content in those conversations. And sometimes it's influenced by my parenting side. Sometimes it's influenced by my basketball playing side. Sometimes it's influenced by my marketing background. Sometimes it's influenced by my relationship with my parents, right? I don't know. I have a vast array, just like the rest of us, of experiences that contribute to how I see the world. And when we can really hone in on those things, like these are the conversations that I get super excited to participate in. And I go and I, one, find those conversations, first thing to do. But second, start those conversations, share your perspective on that conversation because it's unique and it's something no one else has heard because it's your perspective. Then like these are the things that lead us towards authentic content creation. Okay, I do want to touch on one more thing, and I feel like we could talk about this all day. We're going to do one more topic because I recently wrote a LinkedIn article about the challenges that marketing employees have in a corporate work environment because the content creation is dictated by the corporate brand, and therefore it overshadows their personal brand. And so I'd really love to just add a little flavor about when we're looking at, so let's say people are listening and they go to work every day and they write blog posts and social media posts, or maybe they're social media managers and they're managing other people's social media profiles, right? How can we create more alignment between like someone's brand? So I know like you do this, Kirsten, you help other people find their words. So how can you find kind of that alignment between your brand and your beliefs and your values and what you might be showing up to represent today?
That is a really, really difficult one. One reason why I left corporate was that I wasn't quite aligned with what was going on within the company. So I also think usually companies have really, really good values and a culture, but the culture is different to the values. That's what I wanted to say. So that they have values which are really brilliant, but they don't live the values.
Right.
And I think that's a big problem in companies, that then you have your standard operating procedures, and you have the corporate language that you have to use, and you wear certain clothes, and when you appear in a meeting, you have to present yourself in a certain way. So these are cultural norms you possibly have to follow in a corporate environment. However, I think that every individual, especially when you're creating content, you've got a little bit of freedom there to express your take on things. And if you say these are the company values, to interpret or take those values and create something from it, to run with them, because to bridge that gap between the culture and the values, it might not always be a very popular opinion that you have, and you might have to fight for it, especially when the last 10 years of content creation has basically been one article in 10,000 different variations. Then it's a little bit difficult to come with something new. But I think that's where relationship building comes into it, that you build relationship with those people who have the power to say, okay, publish or no publish, to say, okay, this is a good one, this is a bad one. And that's also where your kind of copywriting skills come in, because what are you doing when you write copy? You convince people, you persuade people to do something. You take them from not wanting to buy something to wanting to buy, to have your stuff. So I think you've got a certain freedom within the system, but you have to be quite careful, or you step on too many toes and they say, oh, bye-bye.
Yeah, one of the things that I experienced in my corporate experience was that one of the easiest ways to do that was to just let your personality influence the way the content was presented, right? So in the past company I worked for, we had a kind of a variety of people writing blog posts. And every single person writes a blog post in a different way, right? I write mine very conversationally because I speak very conversationally and I want that to match. And there were some people who did like a lot of research and had a lot of stats in those things. And there were some people who just would like wordsmith things for days. And you're like, this says something about the personality. And so I would say, especially for anybody who's watching, who's maybe leading a marketing team, being able to create some space for people to have their own personality, have their own values manifestation, shall we say. And at the end of the day, we do want to make sure that all of that is aligned. But like, I remember I used to have a marketing manager who edited everybody's posts to the point where it just sounded like her, right? And you're like, well, what's the point in getting everybody to write something if you're just going to make this sound like you, right? Like, you aren't the brand, you are you. And so if I'm going to show up and say like, this article is written by Tracy Borison, no, this is not me anymore, it's you, right? So I think just watching for those things that I think sometimes we've just kind of put them in the category of this is like brand compliance. And we probably have that. I'm sure there's entrepreneurs who experience that too, right? You have like a brand document. You're like, this is my brand and I have to stay within that brand and I can't do this and I can't talk about this. This is not really how authenticity works, right? Authenticity is an evolution.
It is. I mean, I do have a brand document, and I've got in my values, beliefs, purpose, goals, mission, vision, value. I've got that all, my story. I've got it all in a document, but it is a document that I revisit. And it is a document that evolves, but it helps me to stay on brand, because for some people that's also quite a challenge to say, okay, because I said earlier, authenticity is not situational. It's also it's about consistency, that you can't be the nice guy one day and then you're a jerk the next day. So
well, and I'll be honest with you, this is the thing I find interesting about brand documents, because especially for entrepreneurs, because if you are in a big corporation, you've got a lot of people writing or speaking on behalf of your corporate brand, then having a document to keep like, yeah, we aren't bad cop, we're good cop, right? Like, we show up as good cop in all scenarios, that's fine. But when you're actually showing up authentically, and if your brand documentation represents what it looks and feels like to be the authentic you, then it's something to some degree you just know. right? Because it's based on that feeling, right? If I show up and I'm all one for a conversation, right? So there's a gentleman I follow, love him, right? He was writing this I'll just say Dr. Garland Vance. If you don't follow him, you should. He's fantastic. Lots of great content. But he did this post about cultures. Now there's 3 types of cultures: toxic cultures, bad cultures, and good cultures. And I was like, ooh, I have like a visceral response to the words good and bad, right? Because like his definition of bad was about being misaligned, right? So like you have documented values, but you don't live in alignment with your values, right? Like to me, that's misalignment. That doesn't make you bad. When people think they're bad, then they're hesitant to like it makes them afraid, right? And so we don't want anyway, so it got me thinking all these things, right? And I just like in a comment on it, but I was like, this is kind of the point, right? Like, this is my interpretation of what he, like a very simple thing that he said, and I have a like very complex interpretation of it, right? There were a lot of people like, high five, this is so great, this is so clear, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this just made me ask myself like 100 more questions, because to me it like it challenged me, and I'm like, I don't know that I believe this. And there is a way to like have those conversations, and it's just, I don't know how to describe it except it's a feeling, right? Like I had a visceral response to those 2 words, and it's not that there's anything good or bad about those words. They just like don't resonate with me, and I get an opportunity to provide an authentic conversation opportunity coming off of it, and it was super interesting, right? And so these are the things I do think that at the end of the day, authenticity is about feeling a way, and not just thinking a way.
I think you need to trust your subconscious, and you need to feel aligned and congruent with what you do and what you say really follows your values and your beliefs and the purpose that you have. I mean, it's good to define that. I think that helps a lot to really define those clearly, and you can change it later or refine it later if you like. But that sets you off on a much better path, because then you also ask those questions when you stumble across something that you don't agree with. Then you can see, why don't I agree with it? What is it that kind of gets my hackles up so much that I say, oh wow, I don't like those words. So just follow this feeling. When you said you reacted to the words good and bad, because they're possibly too simplistic.
Well, yeah, for humans, I think so, right? Like, we've been celebrated because we're good and punished because we're bad. And as long as we think of things as good and bad, we will think of them as a reward punishment structure. And does that work in culture?
It does. It does for certain.
It like contributes,
not very nice ones. Yeah. But I think that you have to follow your feeling, and then ask yourself questions and dig a little bit deeper. So sometimes it is just kind of a definition or word choice things where people choose a word that you don't agree with because it has a different connotation for you. So I think that are brilliant discussions, because they go a little bit deeper, and they let you be your authentic self, because then you can express your opinion next to the other one.
A path to authentic content creation for all of you.
Absolutely.
Just what you came here for today, right? Awesome. Okay, so we went long again because this is what we do over here. Kirsten, you mentioned your mass membership, and I also wanted to just, if there are people who are more interested in learning about what are some of these marketing myths that maybe are not helping me, or they're having some trouble creating some authentic content for themselves, where would be the best place for them to find and connect with you?
On LinkedIn. So you can find me under my name, Kirsten Back. That's very straightforward, very easy. You can find me there.
And her name is conveniently tagged in this live. So all you have to do is click on her name and it'll take you right to her profile and connect and say like, hey, I heard you talking about the authentic content creation show with Tracy. I need to talk some more about it or learn some more about her membership group. It really is one of the things I will say about content creation, not in a silo. So in kind of a group coaching community arena, is there's like so many more opportunities to like bounce your ideas off, right? And when you do start to listen to other people, then you get to learn, oh, what questions do I ask myself about that? Or what's my experience with that? And it's really, there's like an additional level of access that you get to your Eunice, which sounds like it doesn't make sense, but just trust me, it's a thing. So come and experience it. Come and experience it at your business peeps if you'd like. Connect with Kirsten to learn more about her and her work and how she is helping people bring authentic content to the world. And
one last thing.
Hit it.
Fridays, or you in the US, it's your Thursday. I have every Friday in New Zealand here. I post a post, which is a hashtag content community. So I ask people to share a link to their content there. So that's where you can share your content and we can all read it.
Yes. And I will tell you this because we're not going to dive into this too much because we've already gone over our time allotment. But you might hear, especially if you're new in the content creation arena, this concept of pods, right? Where people join pods and then just other people will like and your post, and it won't necessarily be real engagement, right? It's just people from the pod. This is not about a pod. This is about sharing really great content with other people who might not have been able to see it. So I really celebrate that post every week, Kirsten. I really appreciate that because it just gives people access to new content creators that you might not have been able to experience before. So connect with her and check it out on Friday
every week.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you so much for having me here. And
yes. And thank you for everybody for showing up. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Russ. Thanks, LinkedIn user who I can't see who you are. But thank you for your authenticity. It's not situational celebration, because that is a good takeaway from our session today. And we'll be back. So we will not be here on Friday. Friday in North America is Remembrance Day, Veterans Day. So I will not be having the show this week on Friday. That's why we're here today. So join us next Friday for another episode of Conversations. And until then, permission to do you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.